The night the county hospital called me Mrs. Cole and told me my husband was in the delivery room with his wife, I was standing in our church's fellowship hall, refilling a pan of baked mac and cheese. The choir was still humming in the sanctuary, the sound like warm, dark honey seeping under the double doors. My phone buzzed, and I answered on instinct, the way a mother reaches for a crying baby before she even thinks. "Mrs. Cole, your husband is here with his wife. We need a signature for the epidural." I laughed. The strangest little laugh. Something brittle, like tapping a glass to find a crack. "I'm his wife," I whispered, staring at the steam rising from the aluminum pan. The nurse paused, like she'd hit a wrong note. "Ma'am, he said his wife is already here. If you're hearing my story, please subscribe so more voices like mine can be heard." I set the pan down and wiped my hands on a dish towel that smelled of lemon and bleach. Then I walked out the side door, past the rose bushes Deacon Harris keeps pruned like they're tiny red trophies, and into the heavy North Carolina night. The parking lot hummed with cicadas. I stared at my car keys. My hands were steady, but my breath wouldn't catch right, like it was trying to climb away from me. I didn't go to the hospital that night. I drove home, parked under our pecan tree, and sat in the quiet where the porch light makes a yellow lake across the steps. I listened to the house, the way you do when you think you might not know your own place anymore. The grandfather clock in the front room sighed. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog answered the cicadas. I could have stormed up the steps and thrown open drawers. I could have called his name loud enough to wake every neighbor on Lion Street. Instead, I pulled out a notebook and wrote the word "call" with the time beside it. Then I drew a box next to it. I didn't check that box for a long time. My name is Loretta Miles, but everybody calls me Retta. I'm 49 years old, born and raised in Durham, North Carolina. I'm a grandma, Nana to be exact, to a little brown sparkler named Jayla, who loves to swing high as sin and shout, "Higher, Nana, touch the sky." I work mornings at the elementary school library and afternoons doing hair in my kitchen for folks who prefer slippers to salon chairs. My roses out back are stubborn, my greens are tender, and the pecan pie that comes out of my oven will make a grown man swear he's seen the Lord. Sundays are church, then porch, then the slow dance of a nap before evening service. I married Darius 12 years ago, the second time for both of us. He came with dimples and a careful smile, a good job fixing HVAC units all over the county, and 2 hands that could take a broken thing apart and somehow make it sing again. He never minded a sink full of rollers or foil squares crinkling on the dryer. Said the house felt alive when the women were laughing and the stove was working. He held Jayla when she was born like he was holding a sunrise. He rubbed oil into my feet the day I hurt my knee on the church steps and told me age was nothing but soft wisdom. I believed him. Maybe I still do, in a way I wish I didn't. Our home life was simple in the best sense. We lived in a little blue house with a front porch that leaned toward the street like a woman listening for good gossip. Tuesdays, I brought pound cake to Ms. Alberta across the way, who lost her son last year and forgets sometimes that the mail still comes. Fridays, Darius cut the grass, neat stripes like a ballpark, and afterwards sat on the stoop with a glass of sweet tea, sweating rings onto the rail. We argued about silly things, whether the thermostat was a war, whether Jayla should be allowed syrup on everything, and then folded back into each other like laundry. That was the life I knew, or thought I knew, right up to the night the hospital called my name and handed it to a stranger. Suspicion doesn't come into a house like a burglar, not at first. It comes like a draft through a window you swore you closed. You'll be standing at the sink, watching the sun wash the fence, and there it is. Something that makes you feel a degree colder than you should. A week after the call, Darius told me he had an emergency unit to fix in East Durham. It was a Sunday night. He kissed my forehead and smelled like cedar body wash. I watched him drive off and went back to greasing a pan for cornbread. 20 minutes later, my neighbor Trina texted, Just saw Dee walking into the Food Lion on Fayetteville with flowers. Anniversary? I stood there, flour dusting my fingers, and thought about the way Darius hates grocery stores on Sundays because he says they feel like airports. Too many people trying to leave. I wrote it down. Flowers, Sunday, Food Lion, 7:38 p.m. A box beside it, empty. That week, I found 2 receipts in the trash tucked into a paper towel. One was for a bakery in Hillsboro, strawberry shortcake for 2, and one for an oil change at a shop way out by Hollow Rock. We always used the place on Holloway Street because he liked the owner, said he prayed before he popped a hood. I wrote those down too, the way you pin a butterfly, careful not to crush the color. Jayla gave me my 3rd clue, and that one made my stomach go cold and then hot again. She was sitting at my kitchen table coloring her queen with a purple crown, swinging her feet in a rhythm God gave every 8-year-old. Nana, she said without looking up, Granddad's other house got a dog, a little short one with skinny legs. My heart did a strange skip. What other house, baby? She shrugged like it was nothing. The one where he took me for ice cream that melted fast. The dog's name was Biscuit. He said Biscuit belongs to Ms. Tasha. I tried to make my mouth into a smile, but my cheeks felt heavy. Ms. Tasha? She nodded, adding gold to the queen's earrings. Uh-huh. Ms. Tasha said my hair is pretty like sunshine braids. I wrote that down too. Biscuit, Ms. Tasha, ice cream melted. That night, I asked Darius if he'd taken Jayla for ice cream after school. He grinned. You know I don't spoil that girl. I said, mm-hmm, and watched his eyes move away from mine for just a second too long. Suspicion slid another inch under the door. Let me back up and tell you how I became the kind of woman who keeps a notebook of what her own husband does. It's not because I'm nosy by nature. I used to be the kind who believed if your prayers are in order, your house will be too. But I have lived through enough seasons to know sometimes the rain hits you when you just finished washing your car. After the hospital call, I told myself there was a simple mix-up. Some other Mrs. Cole, some other man with the same name. Durham is big enough for 2 Darius Coles, right? I told myself Trina must have seen him buying flowers for the church shut-ins because he does that near Easter. I told myself strawberry shortcake could be a guilty pleasure eaten in his work van because he does have a sweet tooth. I told myself a woman named Tasha with a dog named Biscuit could be a customer with a leaky AC and a friendly smile. You can tell yourself all sorts of things when you don't want the truth walking in with its shoes on. But the notebook felt like armor. It was a little blue spiral one I'd bought on clearance, the kind kids use for spelling. I liked how the paper sounded when I turned it, and how the pen left tracks like I was plowing up a field to plant something honest. Every page was a seed, a time, a place, a name. And with every seed, the part of me that loves a line dance and a good lip gloss got quieter, and the part of me that counts, measures, prays with her eyes open got louder. The next Sunday after early service, I was setting up the punch bowl when Sister Laverne drifted over with a smile gold as her bangle bracelets. Retta, baby, did Darius ever fix that unit for Ms. Johnson out near Timberlake? She said he left his tape measure by mistake. I looked up so fast my head throbbed. What unit? She blinked at me. The one he was working on Friday night. You know Ms. Johnson don't like strange men out after dark, but she said he insisted. I stirred the punch so I'd have somewhere to put my hands. I'll check on that, sister. Later, I asked Darius about Ms. Johnson's AC. He frowned. Who told you that? The answer rose in my throat. Your church, your people, your community we both serve. But I chewed it and swallowed it back down. Just heard it. He shrugged. Folks talk. You know how folks talk. Then he kissed my temple and told me he'd be late Monday because the shop needed inventory counted. Darius has always been a man who says the right thing while the wrong thing stands behind him holding up a sign. I didn't write that one down. I went out to the driveway and ran my fingers along the chrome of his truck. It smelled like fresh Armor All and peppermint gum. I opened the glove compartment. I never used to do that. A woman who has to check a glove compartment for her piece is already in a storm. But there it was. A key on a purple lanyard with a grocery store bonus card and a little plastic tag from a pet clinic on Roxborough. I turned the tag over. Biscuit, it said. Owner, Tasha S. An address on Maple Glen Lane printed neat as a report card line. I sat in the truck until my heartbeat stopped trying to strangle me. Then I took a picture of the tag and wrote the address in my notebook. I didn't take the key. I put it right back where I found it. Even in a storm, I know how to leave footprints light enough to blow away. A few days later, I asked my daughter Monique to drop Jayla at the school library where I work because Darius's schedule was wild. That's what he said, wild, and made a little joke about chasing parts all over town. Monique, with her soft brow and sharp mouth, looked at me the way she did when she was 13 and thought the whole world might fall in. Mama, everything okay? I smiled because that's what mamas do when the sky changes color. Just busy, baby. She nodded, but the worry hung between us like damp laundry. After my shift, I put on my red head wrap, the one that says "A Woman is in Motion," and drove over to Maple Glen Lane. It's a quiet little street off Roxborough with starter homes that look like cousins who don't quite speak, lawns in mid-argument with summer, plastic pools deflating at the edges, a pink tricycle abandoned sideways on a driveway. I passed the address twice before I pulled into a church lot across from it and cut the engine. I told myself I was paying a bill. I told myself I was waiting for a friend. Then a woman came out of the door, waving a garbage bag like a flag. She was maybe late 30s, hair in a scarf, wearing house shoes and a long T-shirt. A short dog with skinny legs darted out and yapped at a squirrel. Biscuit. I didn't have to hear the name to know it. 5 minutes later, a truck I knew like my own hands turned the corner. Darius parked right in front of the house, hopped out and lifted a box from the back like he'd done it 100 times. He laughed at something the woman said. He leaned and kissed her cheek. They moved like people who practice moving together. The box had a logo for a baby monitor. I wrote it all down. My pen shook so bad the words came out like a doctor's signature. Then I breathed deep 3 times, counted the breath in and the breath out, the way our choir director taught us before the Christmas concert when Sister Ruth gets nervous and starts rushing the tempo. I didn't get out of my car. Not that day. I watched Darius carry the box inside and I let the engine stay cold. Here's the thing about double lives. They are greedy. They eat time, money, excuses, and they need more every week. If your man is living 2 lives, you'll know because one of them will always be late to something important. Your doctor's appointment pickup, your granddaughter's school play, the way he used to run his hands across your shoulders when the greens reached their boil and you were on your feet too long. The missing isn't loud at first, it's just a shifted rhythm. But a woman raised up in choirs knows when the beat is wrong. I made a list of rhythms. He started carrying 2 phones, 1 black case, 1 navy. He started showering late at night even when the day didn't seem to touch him. He put cologne on to go to the hardware store. He bought a shirt I hadn't picked out and wore it like it knew his body better than I did. He put gas in the truck at the same station across town when the one by our house had cheaper prices and better coffee. He had new jokes I hadn't heard, a new song he hummed under his breath, a new way of saying when he wanted me to stop asking questions. I kept my mouth closed and my eyes open. Anger wanted me to scream. Love wanted me to pray a hole into the floor. Experience told me to gather, sort, label, and fold. That Friday, the shop called, asking for Darius. The boy on the other end sounded new, his voice still thin with the first weeks of a job. Ms. Cole, tell him his vacation time got approved. We got his note about the family reunion in Richmond. I stood by the sink watching a cardinal bounce on the fence. He already told me, I said. After I hung up, I wrote it down. Vacation Richmond approved. We weren't going to Richmond. My people in Richmond always come here because my mother's potato salad has a draw like a preacher with a tambourine. When I asked Darius that night about the reunion, he said, "You know how they are. Dates change." He did not look at me when he said it. He looked at the TV, where a game show flashed red and blues, and people clapped for small amounts of money. I said, and the sound tasted like copper. I need to tell you that through all of this, I still cooked. I still pressed shirts. I still stepped into my church hat like a queen and wrapped Jayla's little satin scarf before bed so her edges wouldn't sass me in the morning. People like to think that once a woman knows, she flips a table and burns the stew. The truth is, most of us keep the world spinning while it leans. We fold the towels so they look like order. We hum while the storm decides where to throw its fit. But there are moments that slice the hum. One came on a hot Thursday, when the mailman brought a stack of envelopes fat with whatever life was about to say. In between a light bill and a coupon for carpet cleaning was a glossy postcard. "Welcome to Maple Glen Family Care. Thank you for choosing us for your baby's first checkup." A handwriting like careful rain had filled in. Baby Cole, 6 weeks. The address was Maple Glen Lane. The last name Cole stared back like a mirror held wrong. I took that postcard to the kitchen, set it beside the salt, and looked at it for a long time. Then I put it in my notebook, slid the book into a cereal box, and put the cereal box in the back of the pantry behind the big stock pot. Secrets and soup live close in a southern kitchen. We know where to put each. I know what you're thinking. Go to the hospital, go to Maple Glen, go to his job, make a scene, gather a crowd so the lies have to come outside and breathe. I thought it too, but I grew up watching my mother choose when to fight. She would say, "Retta, if you go to a battle without boots, you'll get your feet cut." Boots to her meant facts, witness, timing, and a plan that didn't need screaming to be heard. I was still barefoot. And besides, there was Jayla, and there was Monique, and there was the way scandal tastes in a small community. You spill it, and it stains everybody for a season. So I waited, and I gathered, and sometimes at night I pressed my hand to the spot between my ribs, the little soft valley God gave us, and asked, "Show me the way that keeps us safe." The answer came on a Tuesday when Darius left his work order clipboard on the kitchen table. He'd never done that. His clipboard was his Bible. I flipped it open like I had a right, because I did. Tucked under the third sheet was a lease copy. Tenant 1, Darius Cole. Tenant 2, Tasha Simmons. Unit B. Start date 8 months ago. My name began to feel like a hat that didn't fit. I stared at the signatures. His looked like him. Confident, a little cocky, a swoop where there should be a straight line. Hers was neat, careful, like a woman who pays her bills early just to watch other folks scramble. I didn't cry. Something colder than tears moved through me, like walking into a freezer where the meat hangs heavy and you can smell the iron. I made a copy on the church copier after choir practice. I told Sister Ruth I was duplicating the youth schedule and slid the paper into my notebook. I added a new page titled Plan. Under that, I wrote, spare key, witness, funds, separate, pastor, attorney. I left boxes by each, ready for checks. I got my spare key the old-fashioned way. I asked the Lord to give me a window, and then I paid attention when he slid one open. Darius took his truck in for inspection Saturday morning and asked me to pick him up from the shop. "They're saying 2 hours, baby. Let's grab brunch," he said, and smiled like dimples were enough to fix arithmetic. I said, "Sure," and put on the red dress he likes, and we ate pancakes at the diner where the coffee can taste like a miracle if the pot is fresh. In the middle of his second plate, his phone buzzed, the Navy one. He glanced and flipped it screen down. "Inventory," he said with a half laugh. "They got me on Saturdays now." He excused himself to the bathroom. He left both phones on the table. My hands didn't shake. I flipped the Navy one, opened the texts, and read about a diaper brand that didn't leak, a pediatrician appointment, a thank you for the electric bill he'd paid, a picture of a baby's hand wrapped around his finger like a ribbon. The contact name at the top was a heart emoji and the letter T. I took pictures on my own phone, not of the baby, Lord no. I couldn't stand that tender little fist in my camera roll, but of the bill receipts, the appointment day, the names and numbers. I set the phone back where it had been. When he returned, I smiled at him the way you smile at a man who doesn't yet know you have put on boots. On the drive back to the shop, he asked what I wanted to do with the rest of Saturday. I said I might drive out to the farmer's market for peaches. He kissed my hand at the red light. "Bring me back too," he said. "You know I like them cold." I nodded, and I did buy peaches. I also drove to Maple Glen with a key copy I'd made from the purple lanyard one. Don't ask me how. A woman can learn to duplicate things handed to her by accident, and the Lord will guide her steps so nobody notices the extra stop. I didn't use the key that day. I sat in the car across the street, heat pouring through the windshield, and watched the neighborhood invisible itself in the afternoon. Somewhere, a radio played a slow Temptations song. The dog barked. A woman laughed. A baby cried, then hiccuped into silence. I kept my hands on my thighs and whispered a prayer, not for vengeance, not even for clarity. I prayed for steadiness, because the right move at the wrong time is a wrong move. If you're wondering where my people are in all this, my pastor, my best friend, my neighbor who knows when your trash day changes, they're here. But sometimes a woman has to be alone in her knowing before she invites anybody into it. I did tell one person, Deacon Henry, who is also a sheriff's deputy and who has eyes that never judge. I told him because I needed to know if I was going to blow up my life or detonate only the part that deserved it. We sat under the metal awning behind the church where the smokers go between services. He chose toothpicks instead. "Sis Retta," he said, tucking a toothpick into the corner of his mouth like punctuation. "You don't need proof to leave, you need proof to win." I stared at the gravel where somebody's heel had ground in a shine. "I don't want to leave," I said. The truth cut my tongue like it was made of something sharp. I want to be safe. I want Jayla and Monique to be safe. I want this house we built to sit upright when the wind hits it, and I want the truth to stand up and say its name. He nodded. "Then keep your notebook. Don't confront till your story can stand without your voice. And when the time comes, do it where a man will respect the floor he's standing on." I knew where that floor would be. The church hall, the court, a table where no one can pretend they didn't hear what was spoken, but not yet. "Anything else?" he asked. I hesitated. "Does the hospital... will they tell me anything?" He sighed. "Only if your name is on the line that matters. But sometimes folks sign things they ain't supposed to." He tapped the toothpick against his knee. "Be careful, Sis Retta. Double lives turn triple dangerous when they feel exposure coming." I walked home slow, the way a person does when each step is trying to teach her something. The 4th of July came, a Wednesday that felt like a Saturday because the whole street smelled like charcoal and children. We set up folding tables, and I made a pitcher of lemonade you couldn't drink without smiling. Darius held Jayla so she could wave a sparkler in circles that made gold flowers on the air. He laughed, head thrown back, and for a second all my suspicion sat down and crossed its legs and took a rest. That's the cruelty of it. Joy doesn't quit just because the truth is ugly. Around 9, he said he needed to run to the store because we were low on lighter fluid. "I won't be long," he told me, kissing my cheek. Something in me rose up. Not anger, not yet, just a sense like a dog pointing at a pheasant in tall grass. I nodded and waved as if I were thinking about nothing but potato salad. Then I slipped my keys into my pocket, told Monique I'd be right back, and got into my car. I followed his taillights to Maple Glen. He didn't stop at any store. He turned into the little street, the one that looks like Cousins, and parked in front of Unit B. I parked a block down, under a maple that had more memory than leaves. The neighborhood was lit up with fireworks, red chrysanthemums blossoming between roof lines, kids yelling, somebody shouting, "Do the big one now!" I sat there with my engine off and my hands on the wheel, and I felt old and new at the same time, like my great-grandmother and my future self had both reached over and laced their fingers through mine. He went inside. The door closed. I waited 20 minutes, 30, 40. When I finally got out of my car, my legs felt like they belonged to somebody who runs for exercise on purpose. I walked down the sidewalk with the key in my palm and the notebook in my bag, and when I reached Unit B, I looked through the little rectangle of glass in the door. The curtains were drawn. A child's shadow crossed once and then disappeared. I slid the key toward the lock. My hands were steady. I told myself I wasn't going to burst in like a story on the 6 o'clock news. I was going to stand in the doorway and say my own name and his and ask him which one belonged to him tonight. I told myself I'd turn around if a neighbor stepped out, if a siren howled, if a baby cried in that way that breaks you. But no siren came. No neighbor stepped out. The baby, if there was one, was sleeping with a mouth like a quarter moon. I put the key in the lock and felt the tiniest resistance, a metal tongue testing mine, and I turned it just enough to hear the latch whisper. Then a woman's voice inside, clear as a bell across a summer field, called out, "Dee, you get the light? Biscuit still spooked." I froze, my hand on the key, my heart holding its breath like it didn't want to be counted. Behind me, a firework bloomed so bright the whole door lit up red as a stop sign. The sound of that woman's voice behind the door, casual, homely, calling him Dee, pressed into me harder than any slap. I slipped the key back out of the lock and stepped away. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just walked down that sidewalk like it was the longest aisle of my life, fireworks bursting overhead like the sky was mocking me. Every red flare felt like the Lord was shining a spotlight on my shame. I sat in my car with the notebook open on my lap, the page wet where a tear had fallen before I even noticed it was coming. My handwriting was shaky, but I wrote it anyway. He lives here. Then I drew a box beside it, empty, waiting for a check mark that would mean something final. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the ceiling fan go round, listened to Darius come in after midnight, smelling faintly of baby powder and cologne that wasn't mine. He slid into bed and curled around me like always. That was the cruelest part. How natural he was in his deceit. I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the moonlight bending through the blinds, and I made a vow in the stillness. I would not be destroyed. I would be deliberate. The next week, I called Monique to my kitchen table. She came in her scrubs, tired from a 12-hour shift, but the minute she saw my face, she sat up straight. "Mama, what's wrong?" I slid the notebook across to her. She turned the pages, her breath catching here and there as the pieces fit together. When she got to the lease copy, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Lord have mercy." I expected anger. I expected her to throw that book down and storm out to confront him herself. But my daughter's strength is in her stillness. She reached across and took my hand. "Mama, you're not crazy. You're not imagining. You're not alone. We'll handle this the right way." Her calm gave me mine back. Together, we started planning. We talked about who needed to know, how to keep Jayla shielded, and when to confront Darius. "Not in this house," I said. "Not where Jayla sleeps. He doesn't get to stain these walls." Monique nodded. "Then where?" I thought of Deacon Henry's advice. The floor a man respects. That meant the church. Sunday came, and I went through the motions like nothing was different. I wore my best lavender dress and sang in the choir with a voice steady enough to fool most, but my eyes found him in the congregation. Darius smiling, clapping, swaying like he was in the spirit. And I saw the lie wrapped around him like a second suit. After service, I pulled Pastor Daniels aside. He's a tall man with a voice that can hush a room without raising a note. I told him in plain words, "Pastor, my husband is living a double life. I have proof. I will not cause a scene here, but I need your help setting a table where the truth can't be denied." He looked at me long and hard, then nodded. "Bring what you have. Wednesday night, after Bible study, we'll gather who needs to be there. If the devil sits at the table, he will not be comfortable." That Wednesday, I slid my notebook into my church bag and kissed Jayla goodnight at Monique's. My hands shook, but not from fear, from anticipation. Darius drove us to church like always, humming a tune, holding my hand on the console. The same man who called me baby and told me he liked my greens was the same man who tucked diapers into another woman's closet. That contradiction rattled through me like loose change in a dryer. After Bible study, Pastor gathered us in the fellowship hall. Darius looked confused when he saw Pastor, Deacon Henry, and even Sister Laverne sitting at the table. "What's this about?" he asked. His voice was smooth, but his eyes darted. I pulled the notebook from my bag and set it down in front of him. "This is about truth," I said. I opened it to the first page, the hospital call. Then I turned each page slowly. The receipts, the neighbor's sightings, Jayla's innocent words about Biscuit, the lease copy. Every piece of the puzzle laid down like stepping stones across a river. His face changed with each turn, from amusement to irritation to something cornered and ugly. When I showed the text printouts from his second phone, he tried to snatch the page, but Deacon Henry's hand came down heavy between us. "You'll let her finish." The room was silent, but for my voice, calm as I read out the pediatric appointment, the electric bill, the name Baby Cole. Finally, I lifted my eyes to him. "Darius, how many wives do you have? How many homes?" He stammered, started to spin some excuse about a cousin, a rental unit, a misunderstanding. But then Pastor Daniels leaned forward, voice low and thunderous. "The Lord's house is not for cover stories. Answer." And Darius broke, not in confession, but in anger. His chair screeched back. "So you've been spying on me? Snooping like some jealous girl? Retta, you always were too suspicious." His voice cracked, loud enough that folks in the hallway paused. I stood, smoothing my dress, and said, "I wasn't suspicious, Darius. I was married. And while I was cooking, praying, keeping your house warm, you were building another, one behind my back. I won't be your fool twice." The silence after that was sharp enough to cut. He sputtered, then stormed out, slamming the door so hard the cross on the wall rattled. But the truth was out, and it wasn't just mine to carry anymore. The fallout came fast. Word spread through the church before Sunday, and by Monday, half the neighborhood knew. Some women shook their heads with pity. Some whispered like betrayal was contagious. But more than a few came quietly to squeeze my hand and say, "You did right." Darius called, begged, cursed, called again. I let most ring out. Once I answered, just to end it. "You've lost me, Darius. Don't come back here. The locks will be changed." He laughed bitterly. "You think you're strong? You're nothing without me." I breathed steady and said, "Then watch me be nothing and watch me rise." Then I hung up. I filed for divorce that week. The attorney, a young woman with a sharp suit and kind eyes, told me the lease and the receipts were enough to prove abandonment and fraud. "He won't win a dime from you," she said. I walked out of her office lighter than I'd felt in months, but the biggest weight wasn't lifted yet. That came the day I stood in front of Jayla with the truth, the child who loved him like her son. It was a Saturday morning, cartoons buzzing on the TV. Jayla sat with a bowl of cereal, milk dribbling down her chin. She looked up and said, "Nana, why doesn't Granddad come around no more?" My throat tightened. I knelt beside her. "Baby, Granddad made some choices that hurt our family. Sometimes grown folks forget what matters most. But you know what?" I touched her cheek. He can't take away our love or our laughter or the way we sing when we bake cookies. We're still whole. We're still us. Her little face studied me. Then she nodded solemn like an old soul. We're still us, she repeated. Then she spooned another bite of cereal like that was settled. Children can teach you more about strength than any sermon. I went to bed that night with a calm I hadn't felt in months, but there was still one more storm to weather. The final confrontation, the moment where Darius's double life would be exposed in full daylight, not just whispers and papers. And that day came sooner than I expected. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, 2 weeks after I filed the papers. The church had gathered for a community cookout. Tents, grills, folding chairs, children running between tables. I wore my blue dress with the white polka dots, the one that says, "I'm here and I'm steady." Folks laughed and clapped along to the gospel quartet that's set up by the basketball court. Smoke curled from the ribs pit, and I held Jayla's hand as she tugged me toward the snow cone machine. That's when I saw him, Darius walking across the grass with Tasha by his side, carrying a baby in a stroller. I froze, but my heart didn't drop. Not this time. I'd been expecting something like this. Men like him can't stand losing the stage, so they come where the audience already is. Whispers rose like wind in the crowd. Heads turned, children stilled. He smiled wide, pretending nothing was wrong, like we were all one happy family meeting on neutral ground. But the Lord doesn't let lies sit easy. Pastor Daniel, standing near the grill, spotted them first. His voice boomed over the crowd. "Brother Cole, Sister Retta, do y'all have something to say?" Silence fell. Even the quartet stopped mid-song. I felt Jayla's hand squeeze mine. My notebook was in my bag, but I didn't need it anymore. The truth was ready to speak for itself. I stepped forward. My voice was steady, not loud, but it carried. This man you see here, my husband, has been living a double life. While standing with me at this church, while sitting at my table, he's been building another home with another woman. That baby is his, and so is the deceit. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tasha's face drained of color. She stammered, He told me he was divorced." She looked at me, tears starting. "I didn't know, ma'am. I swear I didn't know." Darius tried to grab her arm, tried to hush her, but she pulled free. "You lied to me, Dee. You lied to both of us." Her voice cracked and broke, and the baby began to cry. And just like that, his empire of secrets collapsed. Neighbors whispered. Friends shook their heads. Sister Laverne muttered, "Lord, have mercy," while Deacon Henry stepped closer in case things turned ugly. Darius's charm couldn't save him this time. He sputtered excuses. "It's not what it looks like. I was protecting y'all. I didn't mean for it to happen." But the words fell flat. Nobody bought the show anymore. I lifted my chin. "Darius, you don't belong to me anymore. You don't belong in this community the way you think either. My locks are changed, the court has my papers, and the truth has my voice. You can't take another thing from me." The applause wasn't loud, but it was firm. A few claps from folks who knew what it meant to claim your dignity in public. Pastor Daniels laid a hand on my shoulder and said, "Sister Retta, you've spoken truth in love. That's all the Lord requires." Darius stood there, red-faced, shifting under the weight of so many eyes. Then, like a balloon with no air left, he turned and walked away, pushing the stroller with a hand that trembled. Tasha followed behind, her face wet with betrayal of her own. In the days that followed, the calls stopped. The threats stopped. My attorney confirmed the divorce would be swift and clean. The house, the savings, the peace, all mine. What little reputation Darius had left in the community crumbled faster than wet paper. Word was he left town within a month. Me? I stayed. I stayed in my little blue house with the leaning porch, roses blooming, stubborn as ever. I cooked Sunday dinners for Monique and Jayla, fried chicken popping in the skillet, cornbread golden in the pan. We filled the table with laughter again. Jayla still asked questions sometimes, but children heal faster than we think when love is steady. She'd sit on my lap, curls against my chest, and whisper, "We're still us." And I'd nod every time. One evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, cicadas humming like background singers. My notebook rested beside me on the swing, its pages full. But I didn't need to open it anymore. That chapter was done. I'd survived betrayal, lies, humiliation, and I'd come out not just alive, but whole. Because dignity doesn't come from who holds your hand. It comes from who you choose to be when they let go. Before I continue, if my story touches your heart, please subscribe so more voices like mine can be heard. I found healing in the small things. Gospel songs on Sunday morning, Jayla's giggle when she beat me at checkers, Monique's hugs when the day felt long. Healing came in neighbors dropping off peach cobbler, in my pastor reminding me that storms don't last forever, in my own reflection that finally looked like me again. And you know what? I forgave. Not for him, but for me. Because forgiveness is a key you use to unlock your own cage, not to open someone else's door. Darius may have stolen years, but he didn't steal my faith. He didn't steal my hope. He didn't steal the joy that still bubbles up when Jayla sings in the yard. I reclaimed all of that. So if you're hearing my story today, let me tell you this. Don't let betrayal define you. Let it refine you. Don't let lies bury you. Let truth resurrect you. And remember, no matter how dark the night, dawn is always waiting. This was my story. Now tell me, what part touched your heart the most?